Councilmember Remy, Chair of the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee, and I'd like to thank my council colleague, Chris White, for joining us this evening. A reminder that this hearing is currently live on the YouTube and Facebook, and is also live and being recorded for rebroadcast on CTV, Columbus's government television channel. The rebroadcast schedule is available at columbus.gov. Tonight, we have two topics on the agenda. The first being a fire code change proposed by the Department of Public Safety regarding the implementation of a single point repository for fire inspections in the city of Columbus. We'll hear a presentation from Deputy Director Michael Holleran and Assistant Fire Chief Ball on why the department is proposing the code change and answer any questions from council members. If this code change moves forward, it will be on first reading on Monday, December 9th. And consider for passage on second reading on December 16th. Next, we will hear the 2024 liquor permit renewal objections proposed by the City Attorney's Office. We will receive this presentation by Assistant City Attorney Sophie Yano of the Property Action Team, as well as Detective Mark Ryan of the Columbus Division of Police. Also want to acknowledge Senior Assistant City Attorney Sarah Pomeroy here to make sure that everybody stays on track. There are 10 proposed objections being considered this evening, so if these resolutions move forward, they will be passed as emergency resolutions on December 9th to account for state filing deadlines. Lastly, we will move into the public speaking portion of the agenda before we adjourn this committee hearing for the evening. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Deputy Director Holleran and Assistant Chief Baugh.
Chair Remy, thank you very much. The Ohio Fire Code and Columbus Fire Prevention Code require licensed professionals to periodically inspect, test, and maintain certain fire protection systems. These fire protection systems include alarms, suppression systems, extinguishers, and emergency exit lights. The entities and individuals to whom the state and local fire code apply to must retain records provided by the licensed professionals of the inspections, tests, and maintenance. When inspecting a premises for compliance with state and local codes, Division of Fire inspectors review and rely on those records to determine compliance. This existing system creates two problems and an opportunity for a technological solution. Assistant Chief Ball, Chief of the Fire Prevention Bureau for the Division of Fire, will outline those two problems and the solution that the Division of Fire has proposed.
Thank you, Councilmember Remy and Deputy Director Holleran. I appreciate you hearing our request today. The first problem that is a need for multiple on-site inspections to confirm the existence of fire records. When we do an inspection, one of the requirements is that we want to see records that property owner has maintained the system according to local codes and NFPA standards, and we can only do that through an affirmation of a third-party inspection service and verifying that they've completed the work and the inspections and the tests necessary to keep those systems in service. This system would allow us to have access to those records that would help to alleviate multiple inspections. A common problem that we have is we visit a site and they don't have those test records, so then we have to make another appointment for a reinspection and then have to come back, and it creates an inefficiency on our side. The second problem is that if a system becomes inoperable, a lot of times the property owner will communicate with their inspection testing company and have that system an estimate to have it fixed, and we don't know about it. If the system is protecting a public assembly building or a residential building, then we want to make sure that a fire watch has been established so that we maintain safety of the residents and the people that are operating in that building. So this system will help make sure that we're notified appropriately and then assist us in keeping systems in service across the city. Thank you.
Chair Remy, Councilmember Weiss, this code change in 2501.07 will allow the Division of Fire to have a cloud-based solution to receive all those reports directly from the third-party inspection companies. The vendor for this cloud-based solution will be selected through an RFP process as outlined in Chapter 329 of the City Code. There will be no cost to the city. The way that this system will be funded is that the licensed professionals who perform the inspections, the tests, and the maintenance will pay a fee for each one of the reports that are submitted through this system. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about what the savings will be from, not savings from personnel time, for instance? Just talk a little bit about like this process by, you mentioned, multiple inspections, for instance, but what are some of the other potential benefits from a labor perspective?
So the Fire Prevention Bureau inspects over 34,000 occupancies in the city of Columbus on an annual basis, and that requires roughly 65 fire inspectors. A lot of my inspectors are senior, and sometimes they're not available for work because of extended sick leave or retirement. I often run short on personnel. So I'm hoping that this will add an efficiency in allowing inspections to go smoother and not have re-inspections. In past years, we've had a 30% re-inspection rate, which adds 30% additional work to the inspectors that I have. We hope to reduce that 30% re-inspection rate to a lower rate that becomes more manageable and allows us to use our resources more efficiently than what we already have. As we try to keep our budget under control, we want to make sure that we maximize the resources that we have without asking for additional inspectors to help keep up with the growing workload.
And again, what type of inspection? I know you talk commercial, but what are? There's no residential application for this, is there? Are there instances where residences need to be, like, for instance, a group home or anything along those lines, where it could be applicable? This type of solution could be applicable.
It could be. We do not inspect single-family or two-family dwellings. We do inspect multiple family dwellings, and a lot of the newer builds that house multiple family dwellings have sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, and then we do require every business or occupancy to ensure that they have fire extinguishers that have been tested by a third-party service, which is included in this legislation and would be monitored by this software program. So one of the common violations that we write is that whether it's a multiple family dwelling or a general business or a manufacturing facility, they may not have their fire extinguishers tested and maintained. So that causes us to have to come back and do a reinspection. With this, we'll know when someone is out of compliance, and we'll be able to reach out to them ahead of time to try to get them to be in compliance. So when we come and do an inspection, we don't find violations that are easy to solve.
That makes sense. I understand you haven't done the RFP process, but do we have an idea what the associated costs would be to the licensee?
Around anywhere from $12 to $15 per report that's offered. So there'd be one report for a sprinkler system, one report for a fire alarm system, one report for a commercial hood, but $12 to $15 per report.
Okay, seems fair.
Yeah.
Councilmember Weiss, do you have any questions? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Let's see. I now turn the floor over to Sophie Yano and Sarah Palmer and Detective Ryan for your presentation. So, Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Remy and Councilmember Weiss, for having us here today. Can you hear me okay? No? Okay. All right, can you hear me better now? Awesome. Better? All right, we're good? Okay. Thank you so much, Chair Remy and Councilmember Weiss, for allowing us to be here today. My name is Sophie Yano. I'm an assistant city attorney for the city of Columbus, working on the property action team. I'm here today with my colleagues Sarah Pomeroy and Columbus Police Detective Mark Ryan to present the locations for the City Council's review for the 2024 liquor permit objection cycle. So I'm going to start today by going over a little bit about our process generally before getting into the specific objections for this year. So as I mentioned, I work on the property action team. This team was designed several years ago to try to address some of the problems plaguing Columbus communities. So our office is split up into 6 police zones with an attorney assigned to each zone. I personally am assigned to the east side, Zone 2, and our goal in having this team is to have attorneys that are in touch with the communities themselves. So as part of that, we work with all different sorts of state and local entities, as well as community organizations, to make sure that we fully understand the problems that the citizens are actually dealing with. We try to do that in an effort to uplift all neighborhoods by addressing specific problem properties within those neighborhoods. We also have a team of social workers that work with us and go into these communities to make sure that when we are interacting in these communities, we are providing the wraparound services that they need to fully thrive to the best of their abilities. As I mentioned, each of our attorneys are assigned to a specific zone, but attorneys on our team, like Sarah and I, are also taking on citywide projects like the liquor process. So when it comes to the permit renewal objection process, there are 8 major steps. I'll kind of go through each of them individually. Normally, for 99% of the year, we are doing the top 3 steps. So that's identify establishments, investigation, and evaluation. Today, we're here on step 4, which is the city attorney's recommendation to city council. Step 5 is city council providing a resolution to the Division of Liquor Control with recommendations for, or with objections for liquor permits for the upcoming year. And from there, the Division of Liquor Control takes over and will actually hear the case, issue a decision prior to going into any sort of appeals process. But as I mentioned, we spend the majority of our year doing the identification, investigation, and evaluation part of the process. So places come to our attention in a myriad of different ways, often through partnerships with police, community organizations, citizen emails telling us of places in their neighborhoods that have been causing troubles or have had violent crime incidents. We also work very closely with area commissions, civic associations, block watches, who are often the first to know of these problem properties and the extent to which the problems are impacting the surrounding neighborhoods. When we get when we get notice of these properties, we look at a number of different things to determine whether or not they rise to the level of our team taking action. That could be action in the form of a liquor objection such as today, or that could be a nuisance abatement action or more informal communications with that business. The factors that we look at include liquor violations at the property, narcotics use, and sales, high levels of violent crime, crimes where alcohol or intoxicated individuals have come into play, and then a series of other health code, fire code, and building code violations. Once we have identified a place that is a problem property, we will send notification to the owner. So that often comes in the form of warning letters sent by our Columbus Police Detective, giving the property owner and the business owner notice of the activity happening at the property and the potential ramifications if that activity is not addressed. We frequently in this process will work with those business owners to try to course correct. We've found that by and large, most people want to have safe, productive businesses, and some people just don't know the right steps to take. in our experience, we have identified a number of different, best practices that have steered places in the right direction, and we are always happy to do whatever we can to aid those businesses in deterring some of this nuisance activity, whether that be a meeting with us, advising on new procedures, or even doing a walkthrough of the property to identify best places for more lighting or cameras or more security. So once we get to a point where we get to the end of the year, and every year liquor objections are due. This is a scheduled process, and every year we will go through a long list of places that have come on to our radar for one reason or another throughout the year, and whittle down that list into the places that we think are the highest priority for this process. The city takes it very seriously, which places we're objecting to. I know other places that do this sometimes just will object to many places and just hope that things get resolved on the other end. We try to only object to places that we really feel have warranted that kind of action. So we put a lot of work into contacting these businesses beforehand to let them know about the activity, giving places an opportunity to cure the violations prior to presenting these objections in front of you all today. I believe. Once we have made these presentations, and if City Council decides to adopt our recommendations for these, they will, as I said, go to the Division of Liquor Control. At that point, there are multiple different kind of pathways it could go down. The Division of Liquor Control could sustain the objection, in which case the business would lose their liquor permit for the next year. It wouldn't be issued. Our objection could be overruled, in which they would be granted the permit and continue to operate. The business itself could forfeit the permit, or we could come to an agreement between the City of Columbus and the permit holder to have better, safer practices. 9 times out of 10, we will work with them, the permit holder. We will come to an agreement. Now, sometimes those agreements aren't long-lasting. Sometimes things fall through just as time goes on and conditions change. You'll see a couple presentations tonight of places that have been on our radar before or in this position before and are returning now due to a resurgence of the same activity. So it's obviously not a fail-proof process, but we have seen it to be really effective. Yes. This is just a brief, before I go into kind of what we're doing tonight, this is just a brief overview of the different types of permits. So when we look at the different types of permits, these are the most common ones that relate to gas stations, markets, and bars. So if you look at the C permits, those are all carry-out permits, so most often held by our gas stations and our markets. And then all of our D permits would be the dine-in permits, so restaurants, bars. The only exception to that a little bit is D6, which is a Sunday sale permit. I will note in this that per Ohio laws and regulations, spirituous liquor or liquor beverages are not allowed to be sold in carry-out locations, so they are only allowed to be served in dine-in locations with proper permitting. So there's no sale of spirituous liquor or intoxicating liquor in gas stations or markets in this state of Ohio. Before I move on, are there any questions about the process?
Councilmember White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for going through that. This is kind of my first time going through this, so I'm learning. Just curious, are there violations that would skip the warning process in which you guys immediately go to an objection? And then 2, for those that do receive a warning, is there a certain amount of time for compliance, or is it really kind of dependent on that actual location?
Sure. Yes, short answer. For places, for example, that have homicides or very unfortunate violent events, those, especially if they happen during the year, are often good candidates for our nuisance abatement lawsuits. So those are, in some cases, incidents where we will take a case before the court and ask for a temporary restraining order to temporarily shut the business down if we don't feel like the practices or the history of the property is setting it up for success. If we feel like there needs to be some sort of cooling off period, we absolutely have the ability to address things immediately. We also, during the year, this is just the liquor objection, or the liquor permit renewal process. There's also, throughout the year, every week, we get notifications of permit transfers, new permit applications, and those are all dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So every week, we'll review a list of all of the places that are attempting to transfer or apply for a new permit. We will go through that list and do the same kind of evaluation that we do prior to this hearing, where we will check the police activity at the property. We will check any community complaints we've received to make sure that if we are approving for a liquor permit to go to a location, that we have confidence that it will not be detrimental to the community for that permit to be there. Did I answer your questions?
Just kind of the timing related to once a warning is sent out to a business, is there a certain amount of time for them to get into compliance? Is it, oh, we've received another complaint, so now we're done, we're moving straight to objection? What does that kind of look like?
You know, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. If there are large events that happen, like a homicide, which we've unfortunately seen a couple times over this year at liquor establishments especially, we will act quickly. We want to make sure that this community is safe and set up for success. We don't want, to sit on our hands and wait for another big event to happen. When it comes to other sorts of violations like liquor permit violations, fire violations, health, all those things, those will obviously come with their own timelines for compliance. If we are getting to the point where we are objecting or we are filing a lawsuit, it is oftentimes because either something large has happened or a lot of things have been disregarded for a period of time. All right, moving into our objections for this year. So this year we have 3 bars that we are objecting or recommending the objections of, 2 markets, and then 5 gas stations. So when I say markets, those are carryouts, corner stores, or whatever, versus gas stations, which obviously have gas. So our first one is Avalon, or the Aura Club. So this, unfortunately, is a repeat offender that has been before the environmental court due to nuisance conditions multiple times since 2021. Most recently, the case was reopened after a homicide in June, which killed 2 people and injured several others. Unfortunately, the activity at this property has not died down in the months after that. Most recently, there was another report of shots fired about a week and a half ago. So activity is still happening at this property. However, yesterday afternoon, Judge Mingo in the environmental court ordered the bar to be shut down for a period of 365 days. My colleague and I actually attended the boarding up of that property today. So as we sit here right now, the building is closed. The business is not operational. However, the liquor permit for the establishment is still not addressed. So we are here to make sure that it is handled so that we can kind of wrap up the violations that are happening at this property. I mean, as you can see from our numbers here, so we have police reports, or P1s, which are actual incidents where police have reported to the property or something has been taken down as a police report. There have been at least 30 of those this year at this location, or in the past 2 years at this location. And then calls for service, calls to 911. There have been almost 100 in the past 2 years. That number has remained relatively steady over the past 2 years. And the characterization of those incidents is a lot of violent crime, a lot of assaults, a lot of gun-related incidents, robberies, things of that nature.
So I want to ask a couple questions in relation to this case, just to point some things out. One being, you're talking about the judge ordered it closed, yet you got this really active license still available, and talk about like what could happen, like they could literally take that license and go somewhere. Is that not correct if we didn't object to it?
Somewhat, yes. So liquor permits are tied to the location that they operate in. So in order for it to go to a different location, even if it was the same owners, they would have to apply to transfer that permit, which we in the city's position would have the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to object to that transfer. We also, with this place being in court and us having court orders on the property, we have a certain amount of influence in who would move into that property after, what the conditions around that would be. So right now, most of the time when a business closes, the permit is to be put in safekeeping. So it is kind of just like a lockbox where it's stored while it's not being used. As this just happened yesterday, we are not aware that the permit's been put in safekeeping, and we are not aware of any attempts or opportunities to transfer the permit.
Understood. So in the case of this liquor permit, we object to it. That's a year's worth. I mean, assuming it's a sustain, which it would likely be, but it's only for a year. So what happens when that year's up? And let's just say they did everything right and they were able to reopen. How easy is it for them to, get that renewed then at that point, or do we continue those objections? Talk a little bit about that process.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember. So I think one of the crucial things to highlight here is that the court order requires that the location be closed for a year. And it does require actually the permit go into safekeeping. However, once that year is up, or if the court were to order otherwise, let's say they motion, citing some sort of good behavior, whatever they might motion, the court could eventually either amend that order, or once that year is up, they could open with effectively no additional changes. And so I think the city's position, and in a situation like this, when you've had this kind of activity and you've been back again, going through with this objection process effectively ensures that it can't open even after that year process. It is about that this business simply didn't work there. And that's, I think, highlights the importance of being able to bring this back. Yes, we were happy to work with them, I think, the first time around, got them under a court order. They did not follow that court order consistently, repeatedly, for multiple years. Thus why it's closed for a year. But still, that permit is there, and the permit is still theirs, and that they own, that once the court order expires, they would be able to use it. And so this effectively closes the loop on really where this property can go next. And again, that's kind of the importance, that even though we have the court process, this works in tandem with it, and they're often citing the same evidence and working side by side.
Yeah, we say this consistently here on council that, we welcome businesses that serve alcohol, et cetera, but we certainly absolutely have no tolerance for the bad actors and the ones that create havoc in our communities. And this is a shining example of that. And Judge Mingo agreed. You mentioned, did you say they boarded it up today?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to just a little bit, this is getting in the weeds, but they don't own the property, correct?
Correct.
So talk a little bit about like the ramifications, unfortunately, for the owner, potentially, unless they were like in collusion with the operation of the business, but versus the tenant and the fact that it's now boarded up.
Yes, in our experience working with the landlord in this and the property owner in this case, they were not involved in any of the nuisance activity. However, because the property is boarded, no one is allowed into the property. Anyone who would want to access the property would have to seek the court's permission within the next year to do so, or seek a revision of the order. We have not heard of any interest in doing that as of now. As of now, Club Priority, the owner of Avalon, still has an active lease on the property. That lease goes through January of 2027. So we are unsure exactly of what the future of that looks like, but as of now, no one, even unaffiliated parties, can access that building.
All right.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Our second place is Mart, aka Mobile Mart, at 2727 Cleveland Avenue. So this property is unfortunately another repeat offender. It's currently under a court order due to dangerous conditions in 2020. The past year, the business has had numerous violent and drug-related incidents, including felony assaults, prostitution, drug offenses, overdoses, weapons offenses, shot spotter alerts, and the activity we believe is a violation of the court order, which is why it's also set for a contempt hearing coming January of 2025. We're here today because they have also had liquor violations for sale to underage persons. And of all the places that you will see today, this has the highest number of police reports that were taken at the property. So we're very concerned about the trajectory of this business. And yeah, I think its record speaks for itself.
Councilmember White.
There's just a quick question on this one. So in this circumstance, they would just not be able to sell liquor or alcohol if this objection is sustained, but it could still operate as a gas station, or is the business itself closed down completely?
Absolutely. They could still sell chips and any other soft drinks that they have there. This does not shut down the business. Like you said, this just removes their liquor permit. So you could buy a Sprite there, but you couldn't buy a beer.
One additional comment on that, though. We have alleged in our contempt motion as a possible penalty some period of closure there. However, we are working with the attorneys for this location. It did transfer in the period since 2020 to a new operator. However, they are also bound by this court order. Our court orders tend to run to the successor in interest for this very reason, so that you don't have a secondary person coming in and sending us right back to where we were. And so that is still potentially on the table, but we are in discussions with their lawyers. So that will be what the January hearing will be about.
Yes. All right, moving on. We have Spanky's Tavern at 1384 to 1386 Sullivant Avenue. This is a bar and has been referred to the city by patrol in that area, who are very concerned with the number of violent activities that have happened there, including the business being affiliated with a street takeover after party this October, which was coordinated in front of the bar and involved a number of bad actors within the city. This year alone, there have been 6 calls to the property about a person with a gun, and an inspection of the bar done by our detectives found that it lacks many of the fundamental security measures that we recommend, including proper lighting at the bar, security presence, operable cameras. All of those things we have found do quite a bit to make sure a property is safe and people know that if they commit crimes on that property, that it will be identified. These conditions at the bar itself, combined with the activity that's habitually been happening at this property, are of grave concern to specifically the patrol officers who are often called to this location. All right. Our next one is 3 Star Market at 1107 Weber Road. This is another market which the city inspected as a part of our nuisance abatement group inspections back in July. During this inspection, we uncovered a large jar of marijuana without a permit to sell it. A stolen firearm was found behind the desk, and then numerous items of drug paraphernalia were also found to be sold there. Several other violations were also noted from our city partners that attend these inspections with us. And following the inspection, they also received liquor permit violations, including improper conduct, receiving and concealing stolen property, the illegal sale/possession of dangerous drugs in insanitary conditions. The Ohio Investigative Unit, which issues these liquor offenses, also went back in September of 2024 and also cited them with the illegal sale of intoxicating liquor and then the illegal sale and possession of dangerous drugs. So this is a place that we're very concerned with, as they appear to be flagrantly ignoring laws and safety issues, and there is violence around the property that mirrors the kind of illicit activity that's happening within the business itself. Our next property is the Mobile Mart. This property is in the Hilltop on 2635 West Broad Street. This is another repeat offender. It first came in front of us in 2022 when the city objected to the renewal of the liquor permit. It was withdrawn at this time. My apologies. It was withdrawn at that time when a new owner took control of the business, and they agreed to be under an environmental court order, which restricted or put parameters around their operational practices, security practices, whatnot. Since then, they do not appear to be complying with those orders, and we have seen an increase in the amount of crime and overdoses at the property. The permit owners have again applied to transfer their permit to new owners, which we objected to earlier this year. We are concerned that this is becoming a cycle that we are not confident will be, we're not confident that a new order or increased restrictions would really deter things at this point. Okay, our next property is the Circle K, which I believe is currently operating as an Alfaa on 3200 South High Street, which is on the south side. This property came to the attention of the city when Alfaa applied to transfer the permit holder's liquor permit to this address. A review of the property uncovered a slew of violent activity at the property, as well as liquor law violations for the sale of alcohol to an underage person. We've also seen several assaults and robberies at the business, which pose a considerable threat to the surrounding community. You'll also see that there have been 118 calls for service at the property in the past 2 years, which is a pretty high number even for a gas station. M&M Market is another repeat offender this year. This is a North Linden property, which was subject to a 2020 liquor objection, and again was withdrawn in exchange for an environmental court order and safety compliance plan. The market drew the attention of the city again when we conducted a nuisance abatement inspection of the property back in October of 2024. During this inspection, we found that they were not complying with numerous provisions of their order, and in addition to that, we identified a illegal gambling operation that was connected to the property. We identified 5 to 6 illegal gambling machines, and a patron was currently using them at the time, and we heard from employees of the bar that they frequently cashed out receipts from those gambling machines. So they were cited for having those machines, as well as citations for the other violations that were issued or identified at the time. We are currently in the process of reopening that court case, but it is not, we do not have a date for that yet. All right, we have the Shell next on 2441 Lockbourne Road, which is also on the south side. This location has one of the highest numbers of calls for service of the year, and the large volume of resources that this property takes due to those calls for service has required a ton of attention from city officials to respond to violent crime, drug-related crimes that are happening at this property. There's also been a relatively significant increase in the number of calls for service that occurred in 2023 versus 2024. So we are concerned that the trajectory of this property is not trending in the right direction. Okay, our second to last one is the BP on 3140 East Main Street. This is located in the little strip of Columbus between Bexley and Whitehall. This property has had a number of concerning violent incidents including drug offenses, gun-related events, and the business has also received violation for the sale of flavored tobacco, which is against Ohio law, and liquor law offenses. Those liquor law offenses include the sale to a person under 21 years of age and not posting their permit in a conspicuous location. You'll see that there have been 134 calls for service there this year. That is trending up from what it was last year by about 20 calls. And as the attorney for this side of town, I can attest to the fact that there are a number of apartment complexes that are relatively close to this location that we have seen actually crime decrease at. So the fact that crime is increasing continually at this location is concerning given the trends in that area. And then finally, we have Ex-Gentlemen's Club, also known as Excalibur. So this is actually a location that we objected to the permit of last year and have not thus far had a hearing in front of the Division of Liquor Control on this yet. So we are essentially here today to renew that objection for the coming year. The condition of the property is largely the same as it was last year. Last year, kind of our tipping point was a conviction for rape at the property in collaboration, or in court, in addition to a number of other concerning calls. While there has not been anything necessarily to that level that happened this year, there was in August of this year a shooting that happened at the property, so we are not convinced that they have changed their ways. My apologies. We are aware that we've been in conversation with attorneys and property permit holders for this bar over the past year, and we are aware that they are looking into transferring their permit and potential next steps for all of that, but there is nothing so concrete that would lead us to withdraw this permit or this objection at this time. And with that, that wraps up the 10 establishments for this year, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Yeah, I noticed there's several in my district, but all good, and appreciate the work that you've done to get to this point. If you could talk a little bit about, I know you touched on it, on the process and that sort of thing, but if you could get a little bit more in the details about these conversations go on and on and on throughout the year. In fact, the list I think that we originally had was 17, and now we're down to 10 because you had come to some sort of resolution. It's not like there is an ongoing, continual conversation. Occasionally, right, there's disregard or they're not communicating, and those are the ones that get to this point. But just talk a little bit more about the extent to which that communication occurs before we ever even get here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is a year-long process. This is a very small part of our overall enforcement of liquor in the city of Columbus. It is the city's goal to have businesses flourishing and operating in a manner that is safe and productive for the community. To that end, we are always open to having conversations with people who want to better their practices, want to make their establishments safer. I'll caveat that with that we have had a lot of repeat places recently. And at some point, if a place is continually offending, if the restrictions we have placed aren't working, if the added security or whatnot isn't working, then we have to look at whether or not this place is a suitable place for liquor. Because at the end of the day, a permit is a privilege, and sometimes you do lose that privilege. That said, it takes a lot to get to that place. We do our best to make sure that we are talking with all of the players at hand so that we are fully addressing the issue. We know that nothing happens in a vacuum. We know that, multiple problem places in one area might be creating an overall, a bad environment, and addressing one problem might not address the whole situation, which is why we try to be so deeply ingrained in these communities so as to know the full scope of the issues. But yeah, we continually work with places. We will have meetings on site. We will have meetings with neighboring business owners. We will have meetings with area commissioners, whoever we think can help address the problem, because another issue that you see with some of these repeat offenders is they've also lost the trust of their surrounding community. And while it is entirely on those business owners to mend those fences, we will do what we can to make sure that there are doors open, because at the end of the day, Columbus doesn't want a bunch of vacant buildings and empty businesses. We want these businesses to survive and thrive. We just want them to do it in a safe way.
Who else do you work with in regards to these liquor objections? I think we're going to turn it over to the detective here in a moment, but talk about those collaboration and partnerships to get to this point.
Absolutely. So our nuisance abatement group is the main group that we deal with for addressing liquor concerns, and that group is comprised of numerous different entities, state and local. So we have the Ohio Investigative Unit, we have Ohio Fire Marshal, Columbus Fire Department of Fire, Columbus Division of Fire, Columbus Police Department, City of Columbus Code Enforcement, Building and Zoning Services, Public Health, Tobacco, you name it, and they're probably included in what we're doing. And we're always adding more people who have expressed an interest or we think have information that could be useful, because what we found, and the reason we created this kind of group, is that when we bring everybody into a room that might have touched a property, we get the full scope of what's going on there. Because just addressing building violations at a property, while important, absolutely, is not going to fix the problem if they're also having health issues and safety issues and fire issues.
Well, this is something near and dear to my heart because I worked with Bill Spalaza and all those folks as a community leader, president of the Northland Community Council. When we shut down 5 motels in the Northland area that really kicked this all off. And it's so nice to be able to rely on that as a city today. It's a national model. It is something that we should all be proud of, because the work is really, done on the street level to get things like this to this point, and certainly the bad actors out of our community. So, Chris or Councilmember White, then I think we're ready to turn it over to Detective Brian.
Hi, Councilman Remy, Councilman Weiss, thank you for having me. This is my first time inside this building. Believe it or not, been working next door to it for a long time, 31 years. And I just want to highlight some of the things that I see. I'm the first person that any market owner, any bar owner sees that starts the process that Ms. Yano spoke about. And what I do, aside from violent crime for a minute, is I go do an inspection at a carryout. Did 2 today. And what we do is go in there, look at the totality of the store, whether it be lighting, whether it be drug paraphernalia, whether it be expired food. Then we talk about how do you scan for alcohol purchases? This relates to underage purchases of alcohol. Do you do that at all? Do you have a visual inspection of ID, or do you have a patron scan ID, which is automatically done when you scan an item like cigarettes, and it prompts you to enter an ID number or a date of birth? So we discuss those things, and what I've learned is that these are all achievable objectives. So I deal with owners that won't even put a new light bulb in. We make suggestions for enhanced security lighting. We make suggestions for the drug paraphernalia, which is huge in the city. And if you have overdoses on your lot, why are you selling one-hitters, crack pipes, meth pipes, bongs? Why are you selling synthetic marijuana? Why are you selling synthetic mushrooms, THC-A, THC, I think it's C, now there's an O, I think there's a variety of synthetic drugs that are sold, and those are pretty ubiquitous in every carryout that I see. I've only seen one carryout that didn't sell pipes, and they only sold Chore Boy, which is basically the filter that you put in a pipe to smoke crack cocaine. So if you don't want overdoses, we make suggestions, or we have a court order if you want to change the culture of your customer base and you want to stay in business, that's the encouragement that I provide. So when I get this information, I hand this off to them, and that's what you see here next to me is some of that work. And when it relates to violent crime, if a shooting occurs at a liquor establishment or a carryout, I will go there usually within 24 hours, and we go over protocols. Do you have a liquor permit? Last week, the one I dealt with did not have a liquor permit. That was an after-hours club cloaked in their event center. Then we talk about, do you have security? Yes. Do you have licensed security? Do you have bouncers? Do you have special duty police officers? And what are your protocols? Do you want for weapons? Do you overserve? What's your age cutoff? So we have all these suggestions. We compile that information on a checklist essentially, and I go through what I would call the evidence process, which is pressing print on all the reports that have homicides, felonious assault, sexual assaults, underage purchases, investigated by our PACT unit. And that is all included in these packets. So that is part and parcel of what I do. And it's a unique process, and I find it to be very effective. And one thing that I'm encouraged by, and I've learned that once I start doing this, I can believe that, well, if you have a lot of crime, we just shut you down. Well, that's not true. There's a long, long road, and many chances, again, achievable things for you to do. And we build a relationship. I've seen the same people over and over again, and we have different things that we can put in place, like a trespass list. Just dropped one of those off yesterday to a carryout at 2500 Sullivant that was placed under a quarter a few weeks ago. And this guy is on board. He has stopped selling all of his drug paraphernalia. And that Sullivan Avenue area, as you know, has a lot of challenges with prostitution, drugs, et cetera. Okay, so I'm glad that it's long. I'm glad that this job isn't done in a vacuum. There's a lot of debate and thought that goes into each property, and I'm glad to be a part of that. And I'm glad to be able to say that there is a lot of integrity that goes on between my meeting, my nuisance abatement warning letters that go out to the property owners as far away as Beverly Hills, which I sent one last week, to just down the street from the Avalon, and that company is right down, that property owner is right down the street. So there is a very long road and a very tight process. So thank you.
I kind of want to comment a little bit on just one thing that you brought up, because it was brought to my attention how rampant that synthetic marijuana is, and not really even selling it. They'll sell it to any age, from my understanding. Is that what you've been seeing out there, is that type of
Well, this has been a challenge. This is a challenge to the Ohio Investigative Unit. You can order a prepackaged jar of hemp, okay? It looks like marijuana. What the carriers are doing is they're taking that hemp, and they're packaging it in little bags, like you see in the movies. Here's a baggie of hemp for you to buy, $2, $4, whatever. And we don't know the veracity, to be honest with you, of how many kids are actually buying that. And as Ms. Yano articulated, 1107 East Weber had a whole jar that was not labeled, did not have an invoice. Some do, very few. And that tested at 22% marijuana, or THC. It is 3% or less that makes that product hemp, or CBD, or hemp. So we're seeing kind of the wild, wild west, so to speak, to be tried here for a second, that we don't know what you're buying, okay? Again, prepackaged, sure. Are you allowed to part that out? We're not sure on that. And OIU is not sure on that. And I think the State House, as recently as the beginning of November, had hearings on whether or not they're going to ban this product or products.
I want to have a follow-up meeting with you because there's things that we could do as a city as well, so.
So it's been an interesting process. I never saw a hurricane machine in a carryout until about a month ago. And I've been all over these carryouts. I do many I bet you I've done 106 months, and you can learn something from every part of the city. So,
Well,
anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your work. Any questions? All right, well, we appreciate the presentation from your perspective as well. Any questions whatsoever for the good of the order?
No questions. I mean, but as a newbie, this is always extremely helpful. So I appreciate you kind of, walking through the process and speaking it to me as a regular person, because I am not an attorney, and then just kind of walking through the issues that you've seen. I mean, we want businesses to thrive, as you mentioned, but we want them to do so in a safe manner. So appreciate all the hard work your team does, as well as the police department in regarding these inspections. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for your presentations this evening. It's going to be good to submit to council for Monday night's meeting. And so I would like to move at this point into our public speaking portion of the hearing. We have one speaker signed up to speak this evening, Brianna Chambers. Will you please come to the podium? Welcome back. And you have 3 minutes. State your name and certainly any organization you may represent.
Hi, my name is Brianna. I'm with People's Justice Project. Yesterday, I went to the budget hearing to discuss the outrageous amount of money being spent on the police department over other resources. I would like to use my time to discuss transparency and accountability. The DOJ report, which the Columbus Police Department has been investigated multiple times throughout its history, shows that in 2022, there were 1,130 untracked use of force complaints. Untracked meaning that there is no transparency when it comes to use of force complaints. We also see a problem with accountability, as Adam Coy was the first police officer convicted, even though Columbus police have killed over 60 people since 2013. A disproportionate number of those have been Black people, meaning that the Columbus Police Department has a racist problem. We also know that by looking at previous budgets from the time that the Civilian Review Board has been active, that the money for it is decreasing, as well as money going towards other programs. But with those funds being decreased, there has been an increase of the Columbus Police Department budget. It's not because of safety, because the Columbus Police Department has an 85% unsolved violent crime rate. And from speaking to Columbus residents, people do not feel safe around police officers. Mayor Ginther, in his proposal, wants to increase the budget of the Columbus Police by $500 million in 5 years or so. But how is this so when during this hearing, the City Council has claimed that they are facing shortages in the budget? The budget are apparently not coherent with the growth of the city. However, the CPD budget keeps going higher and higher. Is the plan to underfund other priorities even more? Because that is what it looks like. But going back to accountability, while police are able to kill people without repercussions, we see that with murders of several people, including Samuel Sharp Jr., the courts are giving the same luxury to white men who kill Black children. We see this with Craig Butler. Craig Butler killed 13-year-old Sinzay Reed and was only charged for mishandling a weapon, not for taking a child from his family. That is a form of injustice. Demanding accountability is the bare minimum. These police officers are able to run rampant in the city and get away with anything. Around 9 police officers have been arrested just this year for charges such as murder, intent to distribute drugs, and stalking. How is that considered caring about safety? How many officers are doing similar things or worse and have not been arrested yet? How many? There needs to be a body cam footage release policy when it comes to instances of police brutality, because there's not one like many other cities have implemented. In fact, I and others from People's Justice Project requested a meeting with Chief Lane Bryant about a transparency policy, and when we went to police headquarters twice, they closed it down. Police and people who kill others, especially children, should be held responsible.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chambers. Appreciate your testimony this evening. All right. right, seeing no further public speakers this evening, I'd like to end this hearing by thanking all of you for your presentations this evening and great work throughout the year. We appreciate the efforts that go into this and certainly the efficiency of this process as it comes to presenting it to the community. We expect these liquor objections in front of council on Monday, December 9th. I want to thank my council team, Avery Townsend, Cole Calloway, John Oswald, Nia Hairston, Mark Carter, and to the CTV team for their assistance in preparing for this hearing this evening. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Chris Weich, for showing up this evening, and thank the community for their support and for tuning in to today's hearing. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay warm. Have a great rest of your day.